loud. All right. Let's see. As a preliminary matter, this is John Brescher, the chair of the Town Government Study Committee meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tucker Holland.
Here.
Rick Atherton.
Here.
Campbell Sutton.
Here.
Terrific, thank you. Good morning. This is this open meeting of the Nantucket Town Government Study Committee is being consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the economy due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Town of Nantucket Government Study Committee is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted to the town's website and identifying how the public may join. As this is a Zoom meeting, please know that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to, quote, screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. All right, so now we're turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude the remarks, I will, as the chair, will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items for public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted via roll call vote. Okay, so let's let us then begin. I will take, if it's all the same to you, I will take minutes again. So let me just pull up a set of minutes to take. Come on, there we go. Terrific. So first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda as written. May I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Okay. Motion was made and second. All those in favor, please affirmatively say aye. And by roll call vote, Tucker Holland.
Aye.
Campbell Sutton.
Aye.
Rick Atherton.
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you all. Next item is public comment. Seeing as we have no members of the public here, nor are there any in the quote waiting room. Oh, Campbell, yes.
Yes. I believe you need to do yourself as a roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, John Brescher, chair. Aye in favor of the agenda. Thank you very much. I forget about myself. All right, moving on to public comment. There are no members of the public currently in the waiting room or on the Zoom chat, so suppose we can move on. Next item are the approval of the minutes of June 24th, 2020. Please let me know if these work or if you have any comments or questions. If not, may I have a motion?
John, I'll make a motion to approve. I read them quickly, but not in great detail, but they're good enough for me. I'll tell you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second on the motion?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. For all those in favor, I'll do a roll call vote. See, Tucker Holland.
Aye.
Campbell Sutton.
abstain.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Rick Atherton.
Aye.
Doesn't-
The chair votes aye. And Curtis, we are just approving the minutes. Welcome. All right. I'll leave Curtis out of this for now. Okay, so that takes us to our next item on the agenda, the election of officers, which the town has asked us to do. So I believe we have 3 officers. I believe we have chair, vice chair, and clerk. I think we need to do this. Ultimately, although it seems somewhat, I don't want to say counterintuitive, but it seems perfunctory knowing that we're going to be submitting our report to the select board soon, but I guess everyone's term is up. Was at the end of June, and we need to
A
do
point of
election.
information,
Yeah,
John.
Campbell,
Just
please.
information. I did inquire with Erica about,
Yes.
because I was appointed for 1 year.
Yep.
So I was wondering about, which has come up, and so I had asked her about whether I needed to apply to be reappointed. And she said, once you're appointed until it comes to an end, the committee.
Right.
So that's what I can tell you about that. And I think Linda's comment was that it rolled on and on and on. But so we could make a motion to make appointments to those positions upon hearing from the select board in response to our report. Does that make sense?
Yes, Rick?
Well, you know, my sense is the committee, as Sutton just said, our life is until the committee is disbanded, and it has not been. And it might not be, you know, for all we know, it'll go on for another year. And I would just suggest we, at the very least, nominate our existing chair to stay in that role at the moment. And the vice chair has been what, Linda?
I believe Linda is the vice chair.
Yeah, and I think we need to think about whether Linda's going to be able to make our meetings or not. So I would be inclined to hold that job open at the moment. And is there another officer or just the 2 of you?
I think we technically have a clerk, although I think Christie was our clerk.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I'd like to nominate Curtis as our clerk.
I can't do that.
But you don't have to do anything. It's just a
What do you
name on the
mean?
board, Curtis.
I couldn't even get on the damn site for 20 minutes this morning. I just figured it out. I had to re-enter and everything. How can I be the clerk? Tucker should be the clerk.
All right, that's fine with me. Tucker, guess what?
Okay, I have no responsibilities here whatsoever.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's understandable. I mean, so we have a nomination. I think the 2 then, we nominate John Brusher as chair and Tucker Holland as clerk and vote on that. Hold the other office open.
Okay, I'd volunteer for the vice chair piece.
For which?
For vice?
Oh, that would be fine with me. I'm happy to nominate.
Good deal.
Okay.
So moved.
Yeah, okay, so all right, so let's do these one at a time. For chair, for John Brescher being chair for another year or until our term ends, we'll do a roll call vote. Let's see, Tucker Holland,
Aye.
Campbell Sutton,
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
John. I feel like I need to abstain.
Unanimous.
Yeah, thanks. All right, for Campbell Sutton for vice chair, we'll do a roll call vote. Tucker,
Aye.
Campbell,
Didn't I abstain?
fair enough.
No, you vote for yourself. You go to the ballot, you don't vote for yourself, the heck with you. Campbell, vote aye.
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Thank you. Well, that was unanimous. And for Tucker, Holland for clerk, Tucker,
I'll abstain.
Campbell,
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. All right, thank you all. Okay. Let me just put that in the minutes. Okay, then let's see, next item on our agenda, as I have it, is the discussion of the report to the select board. So I forwarded a very, very preliminary draft of what we would be sending the select board, sort of trying to discuss what we've talked about over the last 3 years, and I really piggybacked off of Rick's list that has been circulating, and to the best of my recollection, just adding comments. So I think I'd like to start the discussion in sort of one of two ways. One, to see if this is the right format that we think the memo should take. And I guess that would be sort of discussion point one. And then discussion point two would, and within that, what else we should add or take away. I mean, I think we're happy to have this as robust a memo or as brief a memo, frankly. I don't think there's a wrong answer to it at this point. Or at least I don't necessarily have an opinion on it. I'm curious to see what the other committee members have to say. So the first is to discuss sort of the form and content of it. And then the second is to sort of the meat of it. If we're saying the right things, if we're, I realize that we may not necessarily come to a consensus on every single paragraph, and it may be that our report says that the committee did not come to a consensus on these various issues, but that we at least identified them and that we think they may be worthy of other additional discussion. Tucker, please, if you want to start, rock on.
No, well, thank you for putting this together, John. And I did have some thoughts that I didn't get to send in writing yet. But so I was just wondering two things. One, I mean, I took away from our last discussion that what we are going to the select board with in the near term is not what I would call like our final report. The intention, as I understood it, was it's meant to be an update on our work to date, and perhaps to seek some guidance from them on where they would like us to go next. Is that a fair understanding, or am I off base?
Campbell, please.
I think, Tucker, or through the chair, I'm sorry, John.
Yes, no, that's fine.
I think that the first portion of what you said is correct. I think my impression from the minutes anyway was that at the end, we would end with a list of potential future things we could look into and then get feedback from the board as to their thoughts versus querying them about what they want us to do, because they, you know, in a couple of meetings have come up with a couple of things that they'd like us to do. But so that was my understanding from the minutes, was that yes, like you said, it's sort of a report on what we've been doing and where we are. And then as opposed to asking them, what are we do, you know, what do you want us to do? We'd have some potential guideposts for forward motion.
Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's maybe just some semantical differences there, but I guess I've viewed ultimately this committee is supposed to produce I'm going to call it a formal report that's, I'm going to use the word beefier in the end. My understanding is that's not what we're doing right now. We're going to the board to give them an update on where we are at. So is that correct?
That would be my perception.
I'm sorry, Curtis, could you clarify that we are just giving them an update, not sort of our final report?
That's what I would assume we're doing, because
Okay.
I agree with Tucker. I'm going back to the last town government meeting where they actually wrote a pretty substantive report
Mm-hmm.
and made some recommendations. And I certainly think, from my point, I would like us to come out with a recommendation in particular about this whole question of the format for town meeting.
Okay.
So if I'm correct, that in my understanding that we're going to update them right now, this is not meant to be our final report in the vein that Curtis just described from the last iteration of this body, then what I was going to simply bring up was, I'm wondering, rather than a written narrative, whether the format we want to take here is more of a slide presentation with bullet points. So taking a lot of what you prepared, John, but making it a little more digestible, making it visual for the audience. And, you know, in each case we can, you know, maybe have a, you know, here's what our, at the bottom of each slide with bullets, there can be sort of a, maybe a italicized line that indicates, you know, what our intended next step is or what have you with regard to each item. So that it's really kind of a format suggestion.
Campbell, yes.
So I like Tucker's idea, though I believe this has to be both. Okay, so we have this report, which personally, I like the format, but I'm more of a bulleted person. I'm not really a story on and on person. And my experience in the slideshows is that if you can, you know, if they have a report that they've reviewed, then the slideshow enhances what you know, the written piece that you have. And then when you go to the select board as a presentational piece and you use the slide show, then, you know, everyone that's watching the select board meeting will also view the slides, which will be really help with their understanding as well. So I would think both would be appropriate just to serve the two different audiences that we hope to touch.
Yes, Rick.
John, it's Rick. That all sounds good to me. I think both are helpful. I should just mention to you that when I was talking to Libby on another matter, we sort of morphed into the government study committee.
Great.
You may have talked to her after our last meeting.
I have not yet.
So what I did do, I said, Libby, you know, we've struggled a little bit and we haven't had good contact with town council or frankly with town administration. And she understood that. And we sort of said, maybe we can get back on track, you know, maybe the middle of August or whenever, Libby, it breaks open on your calendar to join us in a meeting, perhaps with Lauren. And she sort of said, well, that sounds fine. And it was a way to, I'm not sure what else she could have said.
Right.
You know, I'm sort of kidding, but I think she meant it. And it's a way to re-engage. And they've been awfully busy doing stuff and hopefully that'll tone down a little bit, who knows. But she seemed willing. And we could look at that as a first step before you issue the report. I had thought one part of this would be to make contact with them and sort of see what's on their mind, i.e. Libby and Dawn may be together, but I just was talking to Libby. And that might help guide us a little bit in what the board may or may not be interested in.
That's it. You know, that I'm just going to speak for a quick second. I think that's probably a good thing. I mean, at least we can sort of see if Libby has a sense of what the board is looking for, and that may help direct us. Campbell, yes.
So all I was going to remind, I mean, I think that what you're talking about is fine as far as moving forward, but I thought the intention, and I liked the intention that I perceived from Tucker, was to do an update. This is where we are. This is what we've been looking at. These are some of the results that we have found to date. then that meeting, the subsequent meeting that Rick is talking about, I think could help clarify points for, future report or direction or something like that. But I felt a lot of what you had in here was already pretty good, but I could be, I could be pushing to get a result faster than people want to move, so I understand that.
Right, but John, let me just repeat.
Yeah.
I think anytime you try and get on the board's agenda, I think you owe it to yourself and to them and to town administration to communicate beforehand what you wish to accomplish. You don't want to come into an agenda meeting cold. So either you do that directly as the chair, or you invite them to come to us and they'd get a feel for what we're doing. But something has to happen before you just throw it across the table and show up,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And it's nice to hear that Libby's sounding receptive to it, and maybe getting more. Again, the sort of the frustrating part, the frustration I have with Lauren, so to speak, is that when we get her, she's great. I mean, it is really valuable, and I think substantive when we're able to nab her. And I certainly appreciate that she has been beyond straight out the last 4 months. So if there's a chance that we can get her to sort of re-engage in this, I mean, I think that would be a home run for us. Curtis, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to comment that, remember from what Rick's saying, that there is a packet that goes out before the board meeting that has a lot of information. So theoretically, the members of the board see some of what we're going to talk about in that packet.
Right. Okay, so sort of where does that leave us for the next sort of tangible step? Are we going to, do we want to keep working on this to get in front of the select board, or ask Libby to come in first? Tucker, please.
Well, I mean, I agree with what Rick was saying, and the way that it was making sense to me is that, maybe we can shortly go into just noting if anyone has things they want to note to what you put together, John, just again, sort of bullet point items, not try to write by committee right here, but in a moment we could get into maybe comments or on things that we want to make sure to include. But coming out of this meeting, it feels like, and I am happy to help you with this, John, in my newly minted role as clerk, maybe to do a next iteration of this, maybe also translate it into the bullet pointed presentation format, so that we have another meeting at least before a meeting with Libby and Lauren, and that the select board presentation would come following that meeting with Libby and Lauren. That's sort of what was making sense listening to Rick's comments.
That makes sense to me. I guess it is ultimate. I was hoping to chat with Libby about this, but does anybody know if the select board is doing their summer schedule? I mean, are they cutting down on meetings, or are they still?
I'm not aware.
I don't think it matters. Whatever their schedule is, it is,
Okay. All right. Campbell, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I mean, I love the concept of meeting after meeting after meeting, because then we don't really ever have to get into the meat of anything, because we're always finding another meeting that we could have to enhance, the vegetables that we have on our plate. Mm-hmm. But I would like to say that one of the things I really like about this report, even if we just do it for ourselves, is it really helps formulate some conclusions, or it encapsulates some of the things that we've been working on. I know I've been to several meetings where Tucker will express a sort of well, what have we been doing? What are we working on things? So I like it as a report just as a report, like, we've been through the COVID, it doesn't have to necessarily be an agenda item to the select board. It would just be, and maybe calling it a report, and maybe you just say update to the select board, something like that, where it's informative, not necessarily meeting worthy, where we come into the select board or anything like that, but that we follow the path that Rick and Tucker are talking about, but that we solidify this update.
I mean, it would sort of make sense to me that in terms of this update that we're giving, that it would, while it may not have the meat of a final report, it would at least to a degree follow the format, I think. And in as much as saying, okay, this is, whereas our final report would have paragraphs and recommendations, we could at least sort of have some of the, sort of a rough template of the headings and say, okay, well, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done, etc. But just not have it as substantive. So at least A, so the select board knows what we're doing, and B, so that when it comes time eventually to write the final report, we at least have some sort of format already in place. So we're not inventing the wheel months from now. That's just my 2 cents for the time being. Yes, Rick.
Yeah, John, I like that. It's sort of like you keep updating, editing, adding, and you get the drafts sort of morph over time. And I think as you get comments from us all on some of these items, that will help generate agenda. It might help generate agenda items to be more specific on what conclusion we've reached. I mean, you could pick out any one of these and say, I'd like to talk about, item 6 or whatever. And then we have to formulate what we really do want to say about the HTC, for example. And it goes on from there. We do need to have an agenda sequence that gets to conclusions and votes and recommendations in specificity.
They're just typing the minutes.
I mean, let's be practical. As I said last time, I think we've taken, I said 2, but maybe more, specific votes. One was the audit committee. One was the answer to Teresa Williams, where we sent a letter out and formalized our response. There may be some others I've missed. For example, Park and Rec, we've talked a lot about, but we haven't sort of said, here's what we think you ought to do. And I think that's true with most of these.
But discussion point 2, right? John, you wanted to go over formatting.
Well, I think we're sort of hitting on that, which is good, because I mean, I think the formatting is sort of right. If we are talking about doing both a memo and perhaps a slideshow, I mean, I think we're sort of fleshing this out, and that's good. I mean, that in other words, that we don't want to totally scrap this idea of a memo and just do a PowerPoint, or vice versa, and just do a memo and no PowerPoint. I mean, I think that I think we can sort of come up to some hybrid if everyone thinks that makes sense in terms of the actual sort of ability to digest and then have a visual representation.
So we could always put the slideshow with more of a formalized report, and then just provide this update, which is also helping us formulate where we are, what we've done, blah, blah, plus bring the people who have appointed us up to date as to where we are. And then they can onto that. They can say, oh, well, we'd like you to look further into this, or, they could give direction based on their update as well,
Right. Well, frankly, I have to say, so I started working on this last week, and I found it an incredibly useful exercise to see what we've actually done and say, oh yeah, we were talking about that. Oh, that's right, we did this. And just sort of putting it sort of a state of the committee, so to speak. So this is all that we've done, and I think it has been useful, and it will be useful for us moving forward, not only to report to the select board, but just to report to ourselves. Tucker.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I completely agree that really with what Rick said a moment ago, that, this really will become our agenda, like going forward, that it really is going to drive the discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, John, we could take 2 items today. I mean, this is on the agenda.
Yeah.
And we could pick out, you or one of us could say, I'd like to recommend we focus on item such and such and see where we really are, because that becomes a framework of what's in the document.
I'm perfectly happy to do that. If you want to take 2 of them, let's take 2 of them.
Helps bring it to conclusion. So.
Sure. That works for me. My one recommendation, unless anybody's, I was going to say we just go in line, but the first one is the basic form of government. I don't know if we want to start tackling that one just yet.
I think that deserves to wait because of the votes at town meeting for some dialogue with the chair and the administrator or something first. That's my feeling. The others are more amenable.
Tucker, you had your hand up. What's up?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with, in a sense there with Rick, that like, I don't think we want to try to come up with a recommendation on number 1 today. However, I did want to just, these were some of the things that I had intended to send by email, but I mean, when I look at number 1, what is devoid there is the results from the election ballot, which was pretty significant. I think as well, while less meaningful statistically, we did, have those forums last summer where we did have some participation and sort of informal voting, if you will, on those boards. And I think it's just important to include both of those results here as in part evidence of our work, but I think they will also be relevant to further discussion on that topic. And somewhat related, I just wanted to mention that I happened to bump into Suzanne Kennedy, who we will recall, came and testified and shared her thoughts with the group at one point. And we just were, she was asking a little bit about our work, and so we were chatting a bit, and we were talking about the ballot results, and she made mention that there is an organization, and I may get the acronym wrong, but like ICMA, where she said, they have effectively consultants in-house who can come and I'm going to say with like broad experience, who can come and maybe assist us with the work that we discussed at the last meeting around education and evaluation of the different forms of government and so forth. We've kind of done the one field trip to Falmouth. Field trips at, this time don't seem like such a great idea. But it does feel like there's further investigation that is warranted. And I thought that was an interesting resource. I've asked Susan to send me some information to share with the group.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so do we want to start since we think that item 1 on the memo might be a little bit too large right now. Do we want to talk about item number 2, which is the organization of local government?
I'll be happy to start. I know that I circulated early on a couple of bylaws in other town charters that required the select board in those towns to have a process by which the select board and therefore the community was informed as to the organization structure of town government. And other than an occasional chart, or I shouldn't say occasional, in the town annual report, and sometimes in the department budgets, we don't seem to have that. And the question, I think one way to pose the question, is that worth recommending some version of those become a requirement.
When you say recommending that be a requirement, are we recommending this potentially as a charter change, or just as, hey, town administration, you guys really should be doing this and requiring all departments to do this for the good of the public?
Well, to me, I found those sections of the other communities helpful to require it to happen. It also forces the select board from a policy perspective to look at how the town is organized to implement their policies and sort of strategic plan initiatives. So I like that way, but, and I'm aware that often town administration is reluctant to have anything imposed upon it that way, but sometimes it's necessary in order for it to happen. It's like enforcement. We all know that in the paper we can read that one of our town department heads said, enforcement is by complaint. And that tells you something about enforcement. And it would be the same thing here, I think.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Campbell.
So I'm just wondering if there was a way, a way to utilize what we have here in the update, saying that we've concluded that it would be advantageous for public and local officials for a comprehensive organizational chart to be submitted and displayed, and then would help eliminate confusion with respect to departments, et cetera, and then put final something along what Rick was saying to be included in the final report or something like that. Further details will be included in the final report, in which you could then have more discussions with the town in these meetings about the requirement piece and whether it needs a charter change, and how it might best happen. I think here, this provides an opportunity for people to respond with personal responsibility, like go, yeah, that's a really good idea. He'll let us do that. But I thought it was a good paragraph on what had been reviewed and the conclusions that the committee came to. But you wouldn't want it to be the final word on it, because I think what Rick is saying is important, but that we could have a final sentence on that. Anyway, that was just a thought.
Look, I think it's the kind of thing you'd want to discuss with the town too. I mean, you know, if they're going to push it, they're also, and Tucker, you might respond to this as a current town employee, the board also has policy statements. And in some ways, policy statements are, I think, implied to have, you know, some rigor to them. So if you adopt a policy that says the board asks the town manager to do X, Y, Z, you would expect the town manager to do it. So that's another level of a way to try and get implementation aside from just, please think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but excuse me, John, but at the same time, if select board members read this, they could begin that process just by thinking it was an advantageous idea, right? And they would drive the chart. I mean, I think there are some members on the board that are for transparency, and this is a transparency issue. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, my perception would be, you know, I think everybody is for transparency. It just is a, you know, it may be, so, you know, someone may feel, well, things are very transparent, but we're kind of saying, you know, the intention may be there, it may feel that they are, but they're not, so we need to do it a little different way.
If I may piggyback off that, I think that's right. It's almost like we're asking the town to sort of dumb it down. In other
Yeah.
words, that there
Yeah.
is, if you dig deep enough in all of these documents that the town provides, yes, you can piece together an organizational chart or some semblance of how everything operates. However, for a layperson to look at this, they would be completely baffled. And
Right.
that's part of what we're trying to avoid, the baffling aspect of government.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Make it for the layperson, not
Right.
those who are within the system, because to them it is very transparent. But if someone come from outside, and one, they would have to do all that research. But anyway, so I think
I think that's a great description you just gave, John. Like that, I mean, there's oodles of information there, but it may not necessarily be easy to pull out for the average, you know, for probably 99% of people. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So where does that leave us, all things considered, with the organization of local government? Do we want to effectively vote? Do we want to take a vote or try to wordsmith this further? I'm happy to do whatever. Yes, Campbell.
I think your word would be very helpful in here, the layperson.
Okay.
Or, you know, sort of describing the end user.
Okay.
For this chart, and it might take some of that pushback away, you know, from government, if we can somehow get the paragraph to reflect who this benefits most directly.
Okay. Okay. So just try to think on this moving forward. So we do make progress. Is sort of the consensus that we would effectively edit this paragraph to incorporate the sentiments of the board in terms of making sure the organization is accessible and open to the layperson, knowing that this is a quote recommendation now, while still leaving open the door that, but by the way, we're going to sort of, I don't want to say investigate this further, but give a more definitive and final recommendation in our final report. Rick?
John, one way to say that is a sentence that just suggests, and the committee will continue to review possible methods to assure the implementation of a recommendation such as this. Because it sounds like we're saying yes to something, and sounds like we would all sort of vote yes. The town should make this organization chart more available. We're not quite sure yet what the method by which that is accomplished, and that's, to me, the only open item here in a way.
So
that's reasonable. Yeah. Yes, Tucker.
Yeah. So if I can just suggest, I think a lot of things are not only what you're saying, but how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would suggest that, you know, we kind of take feedback today on whatever items we're going to discuss, incorporate, have the opportunity for everyone to have, you know, fresh eyes on a restated version of whatever the thing is, whatever item we're talking about, and actually vote, if you will, like at a subsequent meeting. I don't like trying to write by committee on the spot is very challenging and time consuming.
That's fine. I don't mind wordsmithing and taking another crack at this, knowing that we'll have this as an agenda item to actively vote on, or at least this quote unquote recommendation or this one at our next meeting. I think that works. Okay. So that's for fun.
Somebody's that recommend in the background.
Okay, so so I think we can safely sort of move on from that one. And so the next one would be the one on the audit committee. The recommendation
My
on
only
the audit
comment, my only comment, John, was that we might have a sentence that simply says, the article, I think it was passed at the last town meeting. I think articles that were recommended by the finance committee were all adopted en masse.
Okay,
We can double check that, but, and I'd be happy to look for that, but just that sentence, it says it's done as long as the AG approves it.
all right. That works for me. Yes, Tucker, I saw your hand first.
I was just gonna say, Rick, I'm happy to check with Erica on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
And
Yep.
Campbell.
So I was just gonna, I just had a little note, but where you just include the article number with it.
Okay.
And perhaps if this were to become like a packet or something, you could have attachment B, something like that, where you include the writing of the article so that it would be handy.
I was gonna say that's great. The other, if we don't do it as an attachment, we could also just include the text of it in there. I mean, I think either way, but I think you're absolutely right that we should at least show not just, oh, here's Article 97 or whatever it may have been, but actually attach the article or display what the article said.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
So do we vote on that, or is that like a number 2 where you have to vote on it, or?
I don't think so.
Go
It's
ahead.
just descriptive of the facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that my sense is that we could sort of, we might as well be, when we come to it, sort of vote on the memo or the presentation that would go in front of the select board. And at that time, if we're all sort of in agreement now, I think that's almost like the warrant articles that weren't called, they just get passed over and say, yep, these, nobody has an issue with these. It's all approved. I mean, we could do it that way. And I'm just as happy to try with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Since we do have a little more time, we want to try to do one more.
Sure.
Code enforcement. Okay, maybe not. All right. Go ahead, Campbell, please.
Okay, so anyway, I thought that was a bit of a jolly one. But I thought at least on a list at the end of things that could be further reviewed, I thought maybe should review enforcement of codes and their efficacy in for further study. Because that does seem to be a complaint around code enforcement, is the lack thereof. And then you want to check, well, what are the codes and why or why not are they being applied or not applied? Or
If I can jump in for a second, I think you're 100% right on everything you said. And my only sort of add on to that would be, from sort of both a formatting and substantive aspect, that this should be, I think, right next to the organizational chart, because much like there is confusion about how the town is quote unquote organized, I think code enforcement can fall under that same umbrella. That a potential solution would be making it clear for an average citizen to understand how the codes are enforced, much like how the organization of the town runs. So even if they're not in the same sort of paragraph or bullet, so to speak, my sense is that, or at least my recommendation would be that they would be close to each other, so that it could, because in my opinion, they follow each other, and they're while they're not one and the same, they're definitely linked, and it's sort of the same larger issue that we're running into.
right, it definitely represents one of the negative rubs that
Yep.
public has towards the town as a as a whole is, you know.
So,
Yes,
so
please.
John,
Yes.
John, in the course of some of our discussions, one recommendation we had was to suggest a line about code enforcement be inserted in the town manager's job description. But there are other ways to assure that the town has responsibility for code enforcement. And Campbell, I separate that from what the code is. The code is whatever the hell the code is, it is. But the code is not there not to be followed and not to be enforced when necessary. Doesn't mean every nit has to be a police job, but somebody has to accept some responsibility for that. And I think we're trying to find a way, at least in my mind, to know where you go if you're a citizen to find the person responsible, or the town should be doing it on its own and know how to manage this process. So.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of indicative of the, as I say, going back to that organizational chart. And I think it's sort of one and the same, but I get the sense that the paragraph for the organizational chart will be somewhat similar to code enforcement.
Yeah.
That's just the sense I get from it. Okay, anybody have anything else on code enforcement, or are we gonna, or does that sound all right? Yes, Campbell?
So I have a question on it. Does any of the code enforcement, does anyone know if there's any perception out there that whatever they are, whatever codes they are unequally applied to persons of other colors or something? Just going with sort of the just concerns of the day.
Sure, it's an excellent question. I'm sort of looking at this from the private sector and various codes that are broken, or when we have to deal with code enforcement, and that doesn't seem to be an issue necessarily. I mean, we have our own sort of gripes with what codes are enforced, what aren't, which codes make sense, which don't, but it really isn't along those lines.
Okay, great.
At least in our experience, I should say. Okay, let's see. So, I'll sort of leave it up to the committee for right now. Do you want to tackle one more, or should we start to wrap things up so we can keep the meeting at about an hour? Yes, Campbell.
I think we could move on to 5 because I have a quick comment. No.
Okay, why don't we do 5, and then we'll start to move on and go, and then we'll start to wrap up and figure that out. But let's go to 5, the election and appointment of committees. And my very eloquent comment was, I can't recall what we opined on this. So if anyone wants to fill in, by all means, go for it. Yes, Campbell.
So it seemed to me over the past year anyway, so unless it happened previous to it, there really was no discussion about elections or appointment of committees. I think that came up recently with the Concom thing, and I did hear it suggested that it be given over to the Town Government Study Committee. Don suggested that. And that the only appointment of committees that I feel we discussed was regarding the Park and Rec situation with how it was supposed to be select board, or at least that's the way the charter writes it, and then it was sort of town manager. So that was the only recollection of committee appointments over the last year.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Your item 12 is Park and Rec specifically, so they're somewhat related.
Now, I'm going to go in the way back machine, but I believe we talked about this like within our first 2 or 3 months of meeting, and I don't think we ever really went too far with it, other than to say, other than that, we noted at the time that there's a discrepancy that some committees or commissions are elected, some are appointed, and I don't think, I think we noted that as an observation way back when, but I don't think we ever said, okay, well, we should change the charter so everybody is appointed versus we should change the charter so that everybody's elected. I don't think, I mean, I want to say it was with an HDC alternate at the time, but I can't recall, but I don't think we ever actually concluded anything on it for whatever reason that may be. Rick, go ahead.
John, I would concur with that. It was no intent to be overreaching, but I think when we read the comment by town council from 5 years ago or whenever, who said the charter was written incorrectly, I thought we discussed trying to correct that and make the charter clear. And that doesn't mean all appointed or all elected or any of that. It just means making it clear. So when you read it, the Park and Rec issue isn't in chapter 2 and chapter 1 and they conflict.
Rick, that's my recollection too, at least as it was going to Park and Rec, but I feel like we did talk about consistency, or rather the frustration of lack of consistency when it came to, I'm just going to pick on like that planning board is elected, but zoning board and Concom are appointed, HGC is elected, but alternates were, I feel like we talked about it just with the inconsistency as related to that, but I don't know that we did anything. Rick, your finger was up first, please.
Yeah, all right, no, I agree. There were some of our members discussed that and which is fine, and prefer everything to be elected, and others might prefer some of these to be appointed who are elected. So there are those discrepancies. I'm not sure we ever got to the point of any consensus or any discussion on acting specifically on those points, other than Park and Rec.
I think you're right. Campbell, do you still want, your hand was up first.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe the semi-punt here is to go to Lauren, who is doing the charter review, and the presumption perhaps was that she was going to be looking for just such inconsistency in it. I mean, maybe. You guys know more about what
could be, but I feel like part of it, again, this is just my recollection from the last few years, was that it was going to be one of the bigger issues, sort of like how we were going to say, well, or Linda was going to say, the HGC charter, let's not look at this right now because that's going to be a much bigger sort of Pandora's box to get into. And I feel like that was sort of related to it, but again, that could be my faulty memory. Tucker, do you still want to add something?
Well, no, I mean, I was going to agree with Rick that, like, we did definitely not arrive at any conclusions about appointment versus election. But I was going to also say, when you mentioned Lauren there, you know, that I think it would be great to get a list of the things that we want her to speak to us about when we have this call with her and Libby in August. I know we've provided it before, but a refresher of what we are hoping she will be able to address at that session out to her shortly.
Okay, that's, I think that's reasonable, and I think it's probably a good thing for no other reason than it may sort of be the prompting to give her direction, say, okay, well, now let's look through where these sections are in the charter in addition to everything else. Yes, Campbell.
So essentially, item 5 is to be continued. And may not be included in the update because we really don't have an update. So that would be more of on the list of future directions. Perhaps how others feel about it, but that might be a
Rick?
Well, I would think when we get to 12 later on, since they're related, you might just combine the two of them, or not take on the general question, but leave the specific one on the list. That would be my thought.
Tucker, anything? Yes.
Yeah, I think that we should, this would be a good one to leave room, to inquire from the board following recent events, or however we want to phrase it. Is this an area that the board would like the committee to look further into?
And that's certainly reasonable, sort of in light of the last 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. Okay. All right, that all works. So I believe on our agenda, let me just see, on our agenda, we have discussion of future responsibilities of the committee and topics investigated. So I'm going to use that as an opportunity to sort of recap where we are and what we plan on doing for our next meeting. So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we will, or at least I'll start to wordsmith the paragraph on the organization of the town. We're going to add language about the audit committee and confirm that it was passed. And Tucker, you'll make sure with Erica and perhaps get a copy of the warrant, or at least the warrant article number. The code enforcement, I think we're going to, I'll gladly wordsmith unless somebody wants to take a crack at that. Have that go along with sort of the organizational chart aspect, and that we are going to effectively punt on the election and appointment of committees, just to say that A, we'd like to chat with Lauren Goldberg about this, and B, we'd like to get some direction from the select board to see if this is something that they're really interested in us reviewing. Tucker.
Yeah, and I would like, as I noted before, to add into item 1 the aspects of the results of the ballot vote, as well as the forum, and I can send those to you, John.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
So I guess that's the main point. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yes, please.
I remembered what I was going to say. I mean, should folks be sending in, when I say folks, I mean committee members, to you, any thoughts that they have really on any area that can get, again, incorporated into an updated draft, and people can, it's in sort of continuous improvement, if you will.
I think so. I think if you just send it directly and not reply all, I don't think we have to worry about any open meeting law issues, and I don't mind sort of being the recipient of the information and sort of disseminating appropriately. That works. Okay. All right. So if nothing else, with a discussion of our future responsibilities of the committee and the topics investigated, I mean, we'll, other than getting in touch with Lauren and Libby, that. Any other business to discuss? Okay. So that leaves us with the fantastic $64,000 question: time and date of our next meeting. All right, is this time working well for people? Do you prefer the afternoons, mornings? What's life bringing?
It's a good time for me.
Me too.
Yep, this is good.
Okay. Campbell, are you there, or are you frozen? Okay.
I of course would go for 9 o'clock, but if we can only get the 10, then 10. Just, it sort of breaks up my working day. I'm happy to do that. But.
Can other folks do 9, or is this?
I can't.
You can't. Okay.
I have St. Paul's things at 9 most of the week.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we stick for 10 for this time, and then we can try to figure out something else for the next. When do you want to meet again?
You want to do Wednesday next week, or do you want to wait 2 weeks, or what's the thinking?
I would prefer 2 weeks, I think, if it were up to me. I don't know how everybody else is feeling, but
I can't do next week. I'm at a doctor in Boston.
Okay, so why don't we, let me get my little handy calendar out. So that would be Wednesday, the 22nd at 10 a.m. Does that work?
Yep,
Yes?
Yes,
yes.
Okay. Cool. All right. Yes, Tucker.
Just a quick, I mean, do we know is Linda, planning to continue to serve, or?
I think so. She texted me yesterday
Yep.
about time and date of everything, and she said, I'm absolutely slammed tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, I can't do it. So
Okay.
knowing what's going on in the world, I completely get it. But I'll check in with her as well. Yeah, understood. Okay, with that in mind, may I have a motion to adjourn at 11:11, please?
so moved.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, sort of second by Curtis. All right, I'll do a roll call vote in favor of adjournment. Tucker,
Aye.
Campbell,
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good to see everybody.
All right, you as well.
Good to
Take
see you
care.
all.
All right, bye-bye.
Welcome.
Stay safe, everyone.
You too.
Yep.